Well, howdy everyone, and welcome to the Campfire. Thanks for being here. My name is Bobby Angel, and I'm a singer-songwriter, and I'm gonna be singing a couple songs, small, short set. You're the Campfire. You don't wanna, you kind of wanna leave some time to just listen to the crackle itself and other discussions, but there's a place for a singer-songwriter, a guitar and a campfire and some songs they're ingredients for really good things. It's sort of like a s'mores, the marshmallow, the chocolate, the graham crackers. It's just something special about them at the campfire, and I think singing a nature folk song is in order. And so a little bit about me. My name's Bobby Angel, Bobby Angel, how did I get that? You don't give yourself a name. I never gave myself that name. It was given to me. And it's like when you're born, you don't give yourself a name, even a nickname, An example, when I was up in New England, there's a guy that lived down below me, and he was the lobsterman. He was just there for the summer, and he said, "My name's Chief." And I said, "Well, that's I'm thinking that's kind of presumptuous to say Chief. His real name was Pete," and I thought that's kind of no. But after a week or so, I'm calling him Chief, and I think what had occurred to me was that he called everybody else Chief. If he said, some people say, "Hey, boss man," hey, he called everybody Chief to the point that whenever anybody saw him, they're like, "Hey, there's Chief." And he loved it. He loved being called Chief. So you just kind of run with the name you're given, and you sort of inhabit that. And that's what Bobby Angel's all about. I just kind of ran with it. And I got my start singing farewell songs to people that worked out in nature and did a good deed for nature. And then they would go off and to another place, another park. And before they left, we kind of gathered together to, give them a fond farewell. And I put together some songs. Over the years, I've kind of accumulated some songs, and you sing them once at the farewell, but then I thought, well, these have a good message in them, and let's keep those messages alive. And you can read about a certain issue until the cows come home, but if you hear it in song around the campfire, I think it really kind of resonates and sticks with you and maybe inspires you a little bit. So this first song is called Ballad of the Florida Panther. And many a moon ago, there were really no panthers in the swamp. Then there were kind of rumors that there were, panthers. And then they brought in a houndsman from Texas and worked with some wildlife biologists, and they figured out, whoa, there are panthers, but there's just a handful of them. And if they're going to be a stable population and part of the ecosystem, you need your apex predators. That kind of keeps everything. That's kind of a keystone species. Then they had to diversify the gene pool, and they brought in some Texas panthers. And so the panther population rebounded, and so did the roadkills. People running into panthers on the road. So they had to figure out, where are the panthers crossing the roads? Why are they crossing there? How can we build our infrastructure to, let cars drive by and panthers get by too? And that's why Krista was brought in. So this song is kind of an ode to her and her work. And I guess a couple things to think about is, how can you go out there and protect nature? What can you do? And also, what defines a win? We go out there, is picking up litter a win? Or in the terms of protecting the panther, what do we do? Can we work hand in hand with the panther? And this song kind of goes in that direction. So without further ado,
well, step right up, I got a story to tell. It takes place in old Florida near a wishing well. The names and the places have all been rearranged, but what went down, it's more or less the same. It was midnight in Salt Lake when she got that fateful call about a missing footprint of a Texas panther paw. It sounded so peculiar, she packed her bags and sent her money in for some Florida license tags. The truth is, 10 a.m. is just too fast for our liking. Gonna have to ban all the cars and keep it to 10-speed biking. How about the ripple strips? You know they work just fine. Or painting a panther on a couple of signs. It isn't simple, there's no easy cure. 100 panthers and now her. She took the plan deep into the woods. Panther got one look and he said, "This ain't no good. We need a bridge spanning from here to there. Route the traffic around in boats or fly it in the air. Whatever happened to living on the land? That got lost to development and it's approved in the plan. You mean to tell me there's no place left to go? First they stuck me in the mud and now they're hitting me with snow. Oh, you mean the glaciers? Yeah, they're melting too. What once was dry land is seeping into my shoe. Hurry up and mix, we gotta pour the plaster before that rain cloud fills the print up any faster. Nature's a force, much like fate. Would you like some raw hog head? No thank you, but I just ate. The bulldozers, they were pushing in from the edge. They escaped inside a high-rise and stood out on the ledge. Out with the pigeon, she pulled out some flossing, then repelled their way to a new wildlife crossing. She ran with her feet and he with his paws. They lived on the edge, breaking all society's laws. But after a while they saw the writing on the wall. They climbed through a hole because the fence was too tall. Senator Abstentia gave them half an ear. As the crowd of screaming fans, they burst into tears. The televangelist called it a question of faith, that we'll get the word and more if only we wait. Don't they know we're a dying breed? We need 15 square miles just to roam free. They were finally rescued in a big cage in the zoo and fed lots of horse day orbs and on Tuesday cordon bleu. Then one night a wind blew something through their mind. They hopped the fence and put 20 miles behind. Where were they going? They didn't even know. Panther cut the trail and she just went with the flow. Till all in an instant, it showed up in a flash. Panther dove into the water hole and came up with a wad of cash. Then they boarded the plane wearing fake mustaches. The border patrol checked his ID while she did her eyelashes. They lived on an island that they called home, behind a waterfall that shined brighter than polished chrome. He poured a drink in the dying sun. She stirred the straw and sipped and said it was the perfect amount of rum. The fish was plentiful and the mist good for her skin. All in all, it was a real win-win. Farewell, old Florida, you're a distant dream. Sometimes I lie awake at night and I wonder what it all means.
Well, there you have it, folks. I guess I threw the question at you before. What do you think? Was it a win-win? You know, what started off as an earnest effort turned into an unexpected adventure with a lot of twists and turns. And I think that's what happens when we try to pursue anything. You know it can be solved, but all of a sudden you're running down rabbit holes of trying to unexpectedly, trying to get support in different directions, and and I think this song kind of personifies that. What I like about it is we're often trying to help nature, but what if we could work hand in hand with nature? Get the panther at the table, and hey, here's what needs to be done, and go out and execute it. And I think that's what this song makes this song special, is the relationship between the protagonist and the panther. And this is a really good video. I made a video of this, and you can check it out on the bobbyangel.org website. It's called Ballad of a Florida Panther. And I think it was an example of where I saw, hey, the song can be burnished by a good video. Now, I spoke to another guy, and he used to always say, the big thing in the Everglades is we got to restore the water. And he said to me, we don't have to restore the water, we have to conserve the land. He said, and in the early part of Everglades restoration, they started it in the early 90s. What if we got to work right to spend all the money just conserving the land? That would have created all the habitat you needed for the panther. The big threat to the panther is urban encroachment and habitat being lost. The Florida panther needs such a large space to roam free, and that habitat gets lost in bits and pieces. And the next song, Ugliest Forest, there's the forest at the edge of town. Or sometimes, growing up, you look out your window and it's nothing but woods or a field. And then one day you wake up or you come home and you're like, oh my God, they cut down all the trees. Is that allowed? And before you know it, the equipment's in there, and they're building houses, and it's just the town grows into the woods, right? And the woods get smaller. The stretches of woods, you don't appreciate them until they're gone, and then you miss them. And then comes in a new generation, and they don't even realize there used to be a patch of woods there, or a little creek that you used to go to and do some fishing in, or I remember there was a stretch of little creek when I was growing up, and it kind of got obliterated by development. And the creek's still there, but it's just like a drainage ditch now. So this song's called Ugliest Forest, and it's an ode to a stretch of woods that wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, or maybe it was.
Some people said that it looked obscene, that it had all the wrong types of trees. Other people didn't notice it at all. The road ahead was all they saw. Rumor had it had a hobo camper 3. Not exactly the safest place to be. But if you listen closely, you could hear the bird call. It was the ugliest forest you ever saw. It had a 2-track that went to a foundation that somebody said used to be a service station. Long ago, the owners up and left, and so grew back a secondary forest. Still some trees from the old orange grove that in the light shine like gold. Over time it grew thick and tall. It was the ugliest forest you ever saw. Bears seemed to like it, at least one. He'd go and play underneath the sun, and birds like to land on the branch and eat the berries. They didn't care if it was the wrong plant. Lots of mice and rabbits and such, they liked the forest very much. A no trespass sign protected it by law. It was the ugliest forest you ever saw. Then came the stakes and the neon tape that more or less sealed its fate. A week later, the machines revved up and didn't stop until everything was cut. Birds are gone, except for some crows, and a dead bear by the side of the road. It was about the ugliest forest you ever saw, but not anymore, 'cause it's completely gone. But not anymore, because it's completely gone.
So it's kind of a sad song in the end, you know, and it makes you take a second look or thought about, hey, how do we protect the trees? How do we protect the trees? That's a sad story, and it's happening. It's happened, you know, throughout my lifetime and the lifetimes before, and I'm sure the lifetimes after. I mean, how do we protect the trees? And we know the recipe for doing that in America. We invented it. It was America's best idea, as coined by the famous Western author Wallace Stegner and popularized by Ken Burns. They're called national parks. And there's over 400 National Park Service units in the United States. I lost count. I think at one point, you know, they were adding and they were up in the 419, and then they took some off and then they added more on. It became complicated math there a while. So we'll just say over 400, and that's how you protect trees. And some of those parks, they're more than just a little park that, you know, might be a county park. And county parks are important too because they protect the trees, but the scale of national and some state parks are whole ecosystems are contained within those bounds. When you have the natural ecosystem in place, then the water cycle's intact, the return interval of fire, and that's how you protect the trees. And you think, well, there'd be a lot of support for that, and there is. But when you form a new national park, like the case of Big Cypress National Preserve in 1974, a lot of the local community, the old guard, the sportsmen, they support it. But for a lot of the local community, it's a loss of economic activity. And there's some bitterness into what used to be their backyard is now, well, still their backyard, but it's not the same. Things change. And this song, it's called Preserved, and it talks about one person's memory of the formation of a swamp preserve. And it's told from that perspective, a family that had a long history in a place, and that history got changed by the formation of the preserve. And it just, I think it speaks to the complexity, sociological layer of people having a connection to the land, and the land all meaning something different to them. And that when you establish a park, you're not just carving out of nature, but it was, in many places, that landscape had a history. It maybe was mined, it was farmed, it was used for cattle, maybe it was logged. And then the return of nature is to be celebrated, but there's a sense of loss for some. So this song is an ode to that and an ode to them, and it's called Preserved.
All right, Bobby Angel. Across the windmill prairie, there's a place my grandpa knew, a cabin on the Alpines not far from the dried up slough. He built that place, my dad, in and out of old scrap metal and wood, where they were free to hunt and be back in the days when times are good. We get it, in this modern world it's a place of compromise, but we can't forget it either, how they tore it from our lives. Cause a man can build a cabin, and a man can shake your hand, but a handshake don't mean nothing when the lines get drawn in the land. Every autumn they went out, it was a tradition I guess you could say, forged in the sweat and blood of doing it the old-fashioned way. Along the trail we passed the camps where the Indians stood firm, and deeper in we'd see a bear with so many lessons to learn. We get it, in this modern world the frontier days are gone, but we can't forget it either, how they smoked us out with their laws. We always knew they were bad actors, and we did what we could, but the new sheriff, he didn't separate the guilty from the good. We knew the end was coming, but we ignored it all because we still held on to the crazy hope it would go back to how it once was. That all changed the day the dad died up out of the blue. His lifetime lease, it was suddenly void, there wasn't anything we could do. We get it, in this modern world it's signed away in ink, but we can't forget it either, how they betrayed our handshake. They ran us out of the glades back in 1949, but they promised us it would be a different story this time. I split the wood and lit it, and I sat and watched the flame, thinking how so much had unraveled with so many different people to blame. We stayed up that whole night, almost until the dawn, in denial, and your head ended that it was time to be moving on. We get it, in this modern world you take what you can afford, but we can't forget it either, how they took us back on their word. They promised us our traditions in the swamp and the glades, only to be boxed out of the table when the decisions were being made. I packed up what I could, and I left the rest to rot, to be returned back to nature, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. I kept a stoic face and didn't once turn back. Doing so would be admitting defeat and opening wounds to more salt. We get it, in this modern world nothing's sacred anymore, but we can't forget it either, how they pushed us out the door. Maybe they stopped the drainage, and maybe they saved the land, but they killed a kind of freedom that you'll never understand. Some people say the future, it's a screwed up version of the past, but me, I'm just trying to enjoy whatever time I got left. Can you hear the wind blowing and the call of the red-shouldered hawk? None of this would ever be here if they'd built that old jetport. We get it, in this modern world we all got what we deserved, but we can't forget it either, how they turned it into a preserve.
Yeah, so this song, you'd think everybody would be happy, that a place got conserved, but there's bittersweet feelings with many, and a mix of feelings. And then, and that's what I like about this song. It starts off very happy. The person's very happy to be out there on this journey to this camp, and then it turns in each stanza then goes from being happy to bittersweet to a rage. and the person is dealing with those feelings as he goes on this journey, and the reason becomes revealed at the end. And what I like about the song is it doesn't end in a moment of rage, and it doesn't end in a moment of complete happiness. It ends in kind of that bittersweet state. And I think, sometimes there's a bittersweetness around the campfire. We think about times gone by, and we think about, in all of our lives, we have those bittersweet moments we think about, and I think we kind of bond with those there's some alchemy that locks those to our heart. The next song is about a superintendent, and he grew up in the city, and I think because he grew up in the city, nature was so important to him, because he didn't want national parks or national areas to turn into urban landscapes. There were places where people from urban landscapes went to relax and enjoy and get out in nature, how important that nature is to the human experience, to the American experience. But he was proud that he grew up in the city too. He said he grew up in the mean streets of Brooklyn. Well, welcome to the mean streets of Big Cypress. And they were the mean trails. The trails aren't mean, but he was at a point in time in the preserve where there was a big shift going on. And he wasn't the one he was there to kind of moderate the shift. Prior to that shift, anybody could ride a swamp buggy wherever they wanted in the preserve, and it was, the soils were very sensitive, and over time it was really negatively impacting the ecosystem, and the shift was to put everybody on trails. Well, you can imagine that was a contentious moment. And on any issue in the preserve, John used to tell me, he said, I know I'm doing my job right if everybody's mad at me a little. If anybody's too happy with me, then maybe I'm doing my job. But that's a tough road to toe, tough road to toe. But he said, my reward is going out and hearing the call of the red-shouldered hawk, or seeing the deer in the distance, or just enjoying, the late afternoon light cascading shadows across the prairies. So anyhow, this song is called Higher Moral Ground, and it kind of speaks to the challenge of a superintendent on managing a landscape, and kind of what he had to go through, and how you had to be strong. You had to be strong, you had to be ready to fight for what you believe in, and I think John personified that. And then at the end, we knew the issues were so contentious that he probably wouldn't stay too long. He had a job to be done, then he was going to be moving on. And he ended up in the Delaware Water Gap, and that was closer to where he grew up in Brooklyn. He probably was able then to go back to Brooklyn fairly often, because he had deep family ties up there. So, yeah, we all have deep family ties, right, to somewhere. And we developed that with the landscape too. So here's the song. Yeah. Higher Moral Ground.
If you took him for a fool, that was your first mistake. 'Cause when it came to push and pull, he was a man that would not break. In a forest so deep when the tree had fell, nobody heard a sound except for he who stood on the higher moral ground. When the truth was hard to see, it shone out through the crowd. And it was never meant to be. He'd stand up and he'd walk away proud. In a swamp so deep and rain so thick, there was no dry land to be found, except for he who stood on the higher moral ground. Where battle lines are drawn, these are places that he seeks and is ready to lose upon, and not afraid to draw the heat. In a sky so dark and wind so strong, they'd already left town, except for he who stood on the higher moral ground. Where words replaced the sword, he knew just what to say, and that when you win the game, be ready to fight the next day. with stakes so high for which mighty clash to be king of the mound. He was the last man standing on that higher moral ground. Well, all trails go where they go, and they pass by things on the side. Some roads, they're rough indeed, but you're better off having tried. In a silence so deep they all held their breath as he pleaded to the crown. I put the trails on top of thee, I am all ground. Well, I've heard it said before, it boils down to fate, and that some doors never open, no matter how long that you wait. When the jury was hung and the verdict unsure, he preached out to the crowd with both feet planted firmly on the higher moral ground. Well, the man who plants the seed, he can't stay to see it so grown, and only time will tell what fruit his labor has sown. And where a glacier once ran is a valley so deep in its desert to look down, and that's where he'll be standing on the higher moral ground.
Well, thanks for joining me around the campfire. I think we sang some good songs here, and I think thinking about the good deeds of others and around the campfires, that's how Paul Bunyan got to be so tall. I don't think he was that tall. You know, the older you get, you kind of shrink. You know, I don't know. I think I used to be a little above 6 foot. Now I'm maybe just a little under, maybe 6 foot on a good day. But around the campfire, the good deeds that we do, they grow. And, you know, we all have a job to be doing, and I think the campfire is where we gather together to figure out and recharge our batteries. And it's just not us around the campfire, it's us who came before us, and we learn from them, and you know, we build upon their good deeds. So thanks so much for joining around the campfire. You know, it's been really fun, and I think we should do it again. I think we should do it again real soon. You know, I'm kind of recharged. I'm looking forward to getting a good night's rest and being ready to tackle the next day. And check out my website. Only, you know, I don't say that, hey, check out my website because, you know, I want a bunch of traffic there. No, it's because I put my archive of songs there. And if you want to listen to Ballad of the Florida Panther again, it's there for you. And that's what BobbyAngel.org is all about. It's serving up the nature ballads. So if you want to find out about the Florida Panther, you know, you can do it. This is a new way to think about the Florida Panther and connect with the resource. And that's so enough said. I'm looking forward to doing this again, and thanks so much for joining us around the campfire.